Okay, here it is, the Plamp II. The original Plamp is similar to this, and it's been very popular, but it had certain aspects that we thought could be improved on, particularly on the clip end of the Plamp. So we completely redesigned the clip, and the difficulty in designing this clip is that on one end of the spectrum, it needs to be able to hold a very delicate flower and not damage the flower at all. And then on the other end of the spectrum, it needs to be able to hold a pretty heavy reflector or a diffuser, and it's pretty difficult to have a clip that's going to do all of those things. It's strong enough to hold diffusers, but delicate enough to hold delicate plants. So what we did on the new Plamp, on the Plamp II, is instead of having a traditional clothespin type clip that uses a spring to apply the force to the jaws, we use a thumb screw activated clip. So let me just zoom in on this clip here. Okay, so here is the new clip for the Plamp version 2. You can see it's got this thumb screw, and when you twist the thumb screw, it activates the jaws, opening and closing the jaws. Now the nice thing about the thumb screw is it really does a good job of hitting those two ends of the spectrum. If you're trying to hold a delicate plant, you can just tighten the thumb screw until it just barely grabs the plant stem and avoid damaging it. But if you want to grab something like a reflector, you can really crank down that thumb screw and clamp it quite a bit harder than you ever could with a clothespin type clip. So the thumb screw activation is a big improvement. Another thing that sort of works in conjunction with the thumb screw in terms of being able to hold delicate plants are these foam inserts in the jaws. So we have this sort of recessed area with foam inserts, and so if you're grabbing a really delicate plant, not only do you have the finesse of the thumb screw, but you have these padded jaws which really allow you to be delicate. So let me just do an example here. Here's this is a pretty delicate plant. Looks like it's maybe some kind of relative of a mint plant. It's got a square stem, and the stem is pretty fragile. This one's been sitting on my table for a while, so it's a little limp, but if I open these jaws up, and I'm just barely holding that right now. There's hardly any force on it. No damage is being done to the stem of this plant. So you have a lot of finesse with this new clamp. Now also on the clamp, you have these you have a hole that goes in between the two jaws, two arch-shaped recesses in each jaw. So one use for that is when you close the clamp all the way, something can protrude through that hole, which sometimes is useful if you want to constrain something but you don't want it to actually be clamped. So something, a stem or something can go through there, and you can still manipulate it but not actually clamp it. Now the other nice thing about this recess is that it makes it really easy to hold cylindrical objects securely. So let me just give an example of that. So here's a sort of pencil diameter branch. I'm going to put that in there, and you can see that thing is in there really good. You really got control of it because of that recess. Kind of move up to a larger size, and does a really good job of holding that too. That's in there nicely. And you can go all the way up to, this is probably 3/4 of an inch or so, maybe a little less. And it's going to hold that really well too. Move that around. Even flashlights. Here's a small mini mag light, and then one size up. This is about the maximum size that you can hold in that recess, but it holds it very well. So. Now also, when you close the clamp jaws, you can see there's sort of a space in the back here, and that space is enough so that you can hold a piece of foam board or a piece of cardboard and shove it all the way back in the jaws of the clamp. You also have these two foam pieces which are used to hold delicate plants, but also will compress and grab a thin flat sheet that's stuck in the jaws of this. So something like, for instance, this business card, if I want to stick this in there, it does a great job. That thing's in there really good. So thin piece of paper, holds well. Here's a piece of foam core board, which maybe you would use for a lens shade to keep flare from being a problem. Holds that really well. I mean, it's in there securely. Here's a piece of cardboard with some foil on it. Holds that like a champ. So almost anything that you can think of to put in this clip, it holds it very well and securely. There's another thing about these jaws that's very important, and that is these two V-shaped notches. I don't know how well that's showing up, but right here and here there's two notches, and we call those reflector notches because basically these are used to hold the steel rim on diffusers and reflectors. Okay, so here's a cloth reflector. It's got a piece of cloth, and then on the outside there's a steel ring that holds the diffuser taut. And these little notches are designed to grab that ring. So before, with a sort of a clothespin type clip, let me grab the old plamp. So here's the old plant. It's got sort of a spring clip. If you try to grab one of these diffusers, it's really kind of grabbing the cloth here, and it's just very floppy and not a very secure connection at all. And you don't have a lot of control over adjusting the angle of it and that sort of thing. Now on the new plant, once that metal rim is being grabbed by those two V-shaped notches, you have a really firm grip on the reflector, and you can really manhandle this thing around, change the angle. So it's really a big improvement in terms of holding reflectors and diffusers. So the combination of the added force that you can get with the thumb screw and these V-shaped notches really allow you to grab reflectors and diffusers. So that's the clip. That's the most important change for the Plamp II. But we did make another significant change, and that is the diameter of the lock line that we used. On the old Plamp, you can see it has a much smaller diameter lock line, and the new one is much thicker. Now, the added beefiness of this lock line does give a little bit more holding power to the Plamp, but not as much as would appear, because it's not just the diameter of these segments that dictates how well it'll hold weight. It's also how much friction is in between each segments. And it turns out the smaller lock line, they sort of have a tighter fit, so there's more friction between them. So it kind of evens out a little bit. There's a little bit more holding power with the larger diameter lock line, but what you really get as a benefit is stiffness. On the old Plamp, when you position it and let go, it's kind of always bobbling around, and that's not the end of the world, but it does make it a little difficult to know exactly where you've positioned the clip, and sometimes it needs to be pretty precise. Because it takes a while for it to settle down. And also when you're taking pictures and when the mirror slaps up, vibrations travel through the tripod, and they will actually vibrate the Plamp, and that can blur your images. So the stiffer the Plamp is, the less likely you are to have issues with that. Now having said that, I always suggest using mirror lockup, if your camera has that function, whenever you're holding your subject with the Plamp. So if you're holding a deflector or a reflector or a diffuser or something like that, then that doesn't make any difference. But if you're holding your subject with the Plamp and the Plamp is attached to your tripod, I always use mirror lockup, because there's always a chance that vibration is going to travel and cause some blurriness. But the new Plamp is much stiffer, so you have less of that to worry about. And it's much easier it just feels a lot better to position it without having it wiggle around. It still will wiggle, but even when it does, it settles down a lot faster. So it's a much more pleasurable to use, and you do get a little bit more maximum holding power with the larger lock line compared to the old Plamp. So the only thing left here is the large clamp, and that has remained unchanged from the original Plamp. It's a high quality clamp made of, I think it's glass reinforced plastic. We've sent thousands of these out the door and we haven't had hardly any trouble with them. So we're pretty confident in the build of these. And it's a nice comfortable clamp. We also modify the jaws of this clamp. You can kind of see this V-shaped notch, little chamfer on the two jaws. And what that allows it to do is it allows it to grab a cylindrical object better than the way these jaws normally come. So on this tripod leg, when those little chamfers, they kind of grab the cylindrical exterior of this tripod leg and make it so it's very difficult for it to pop off. Particularly on 3 Series Gitzo legs, without the chamfer, it's very easy to kind of, once you're moving the clamp around a little bit, to have the thing pop off. So the chamfer is a nice little added thing that we do to that clamp. So there you have it. That's the Plamp II. I did forget to mention one thing, and it has to do with this larger lock line diameter. There is a nice sort of added benefit to the larger diameter beyond just the stiffness, and that is that you can clamp a second clamp to the lock line. So that's not something that's necessarily all that important, but it does give you some options that you didn't have before. So you can use a second clamp to extend your existing clamp. You can also kind of put them together and make little standalone structures out of them. And the added stiffness of the new clamp makes those standalone structures that you can make a lot more viable to use. With the old clamp, if you were to connect something together and make a structure, it'd be pretty wimpy and pretty wobbly. With the stiffer new clamp, you can do things like so here I'm kind of making like a little standalone sort of tripod with 2 clamps. It'd be a little hard to see what's going on there exactly, but basically you can set this on a table like I'm doing here or on the ground, and you basically have a little standalone clamp. It's pretty useful. And you can see here I've used this clip and I've clamped it to itself. So this ring is very stiff, and if say you're out in the field, if you put this on the ground and then you put your photo bag on top of that, it's a really stable standalone clamp support. So there's other stuff you can do kind of in that same family of ideas, and that's something kind of nice about this new design as well. So I think that's it for all the features. The new Plamp, the Plamp II. Thanks for watching the video.